Do all these people who are fighting to end the rights of free speech for those who oppose their views even realize the problems that they are causing for themselves? Are they so stupid that they don't realize once they establish a society where others dictate what everyone must believe, that some crazy belief won't one day be forced upon them? Can that truly be the society these crazy people want? Or are they just too stupid to see the trap that they're digging for themselves? Let's talk about that. Hey, welcome back to Enough with the Crazy. If you're someone like me, you probably are finding yourself extremely tired of dealing with the fanatical rhetoric of these liberal social justice warriors constantly accusing you of being a bigot, a racist, or even a fascist just because you hold a differing opinion than they do. But did you know that certain notable characteristics of fascism include the attempts to exercise dictatorial control over society and a forcible suppression of opposition? And when you see the reports of what is happening in the country, isn't it clear which side is actively demonstrating these fascist traits? So I want to discuss this opinion article by Jonathan Turley titled Your Speech is Violence: The Left's New Mantra to Justify Campus Violence. In this article, he expounds on the hypocrisy of the left's rhetoric and of its fascist attempts to not only justify its own violence, but to glorify it. So let's get into the article. Silence is violence. When those words became a popular mantra years ago on college campuses, I wrote that the anti free speech movement was moving toward compelled speech while declaring dissenting views to be harmful. Today, it isn't just silence that is considered violence on college campuses, it is also speech, as both faculty and students are actively shutting down opposing views on subjects ranging from abortion to climate change to transgender issues. Recently, many people were shocked by a videotape of Hunter College professor Shellyan Rodriguez trashing a pro life students display in New York. Most were focused on her profanity and vandalism, but there were familiar phrases that appeared in her diatribe to the clearly shocked students. Before trashing the table, she told the students, quote, "You're not educating blank. This is blanking propaganda. What are you going to do? Like anti trans next? This is bull blank. This is violent. You're triggering my students." The videotape revealed one other thing. At Hunter College and at other colleges, it seems that trashing a pro life student display and abusing pro life students is not considered a firing offense. Hunter College refused to fire Rodriguez. And there's just a blatant hypocrisy of all that the left tries to tell you. In that, you can believe in pro life and yet you are a abusive, violent, bigot, racist, fascist. But they can insult you. They can trash your peaceable display for pro-life, or they can condemn you in any way they care to, all knowing that they will be justified by our overall society. It has become antisocial to have your own opinion. It has become anti American to have your own belief system. If you don't comply with what the liberal left wants you to comply with, which is fascist in its essence, then you are considered a violent enemy of the state. And they will go out of their way feeling completely justified to oppose you and to suppress your right to free speech in any way they can. And herein you see that the college did not even discipline this so called professor for demonstrating a violent opposition to these peaceful students. This kind of thing is what is becoming more and more justified in our society, which, in my mind, clearly negates the validity of the liberal talk. They talk about inclusivity, they talk about equality, but there's no place in their thinking do they believe that anybody should have that unless they fall into line with what they want them to believe. The PSC Graduate Center, the labor organization of graduate and professional schools at the City University of New York, supported that decision and said Rodriguez was quote unquote justified in trashing the display, which the organization described as quote unquote dangerously false propaganda and disinformation. It's absolutely insanity that these people would actually dare to make a statement like that publicly. But what's even more insane to me is the fact that we now are a society where they can publicly make that type of a statement that condones violence from a college professor enacted toward her peaceful students. This is some frightening times for us, and they're only going to get worse because of this type of thing. Rodriguez later put a machete to the neck of a reporter, threatened to chop him up, and then chased a news crew down a street with the machete in hand. Somewhere between the machete to the neck and chasing the reporters down the street, Hunter College finally decided that Rodriguez had to go. Rodriguez denounced the school for having, quote unquote, capitulated to racists, white nationalists, and misogynists. She explained that her firing was just a continuation of, quote unquote, attacks on women, trans people, black people, Latinx people, migrants, and beyond. And you see, it's the same old song and dance. If you do something wrong and you get held accountable for it, it's the patriarchy. It's the societal, systemic racism towards minority people and trans people and women. And these are the things that get justified more and more, which dictate the reality that what we're coming to in a society is going to be frightening dangerous for anybody to have or to express their own thoughts, the ideas that they have, because this is all leading to a society that's going to be controlled by the government. By what the government thinks, what the government says is what the people are going to have to be subjected to. And if we don't stop this nonsense now, don't cry about it when it comes down, because it's coming, and it's probably coming a lot sooner than what most people want to think it is. The article goes on to say the redefinition of opposing views as quote unquote violence is a favorite excuse for violent groups like Antifa, which continue to physically assault speakers with pro life and other disfavored views. As explained by Rutgers professor Mark Bray in his Antifa, the Anti Fascist Handbook, the group believes that free speech, as such, is merely a bulgurous fantasy unworthy of consideration. And that word bulgurous means to be occupied with a middle class, small mindedness. In other words, they're saying, hey, you're not smart enough to think in such a manner that we should consider. You're just too stupid. And so you should just fall in line with our narrative and trust us to tell you what is right to think. It's absolutely, absolutely frightening. As one Antifa member explained, free speech is a non-argument. You have the right to speak, but you also have the right to be shut up. Now tell me that isn't violent in nature. Tell me these people that are talking about love and peace and equity aren't promoting everything contrary through their violent actions and by their speech. When people criticize Antifa for its violent philosophy, MSNBC's Joy Reid responded to the critics that, quote unquote, you might be the racist. Faculty members have followed this sense of license to silence others. Former CUNY law dean Mary Lou Bialik even insisted that disrupting a speech on free speech was free speech. The same week as the Rodriguez attack at the State University of New York at Albany, sociology professor Renee Overdyke shut down a pro-life display and then allegedly resisted arrest. Just last week, the Pride Office website at the University of Colorado in Boulder declared that misgendering people can be considered a quote unquote act of violence. How ridiculous. That's what a lot of our educational institutions believe. It's no wonder our kids are coming out completely indoctrinated with their rhetoric. This week, University of Michigan economics professor Justin Wolfers declared that some of those boycotting the store Target over its line of Pride Month clothing were engaging in quote unquote literal terrorism. He insists that he was referring to those confronting Target employees, but that's how they backtrack, right? Faculty have also justified attacks on pro life figures. At the University of California in Santa Barbara, feminist studies associate professor Muriel Miller Young physically assaulted pro life advocates and tore down their display. She pleaded guilty to criminal assault, but the university refused to fire her. Instead, some faculty and students defended her, including claiming that pro life displays constitute terrorism. The University of Oregon would later honor Miller Young as a model for women advocates. Can you just see how ludicrous all of this is becoming? Violence is being condoned in the context of actually being violent, physically violent, and yet sitting at a pro-life table peaceably is what they are defining as violent terrorism now. It's out of control. And if you don't think that this isn't going to escalate to a point to where in somehow, some way, some form or shape that this is not going to knock on your door someday, you're insane, because this is just beyond the realm of common sense. Likewise, at Fresno State University, public health professor Dr. Gregory Thatcher recruited students to destroy pro-life messages. Other faculty have called for or countenanced violence against Republicans or conservatives. Professors have shouted down speakers, destroyed property, participated in riots, and verbally attacked students. University of Rhode Island professor Eric Loomis defended the murder of a conservative protester and said he saw, quote unquote, nothing wrong with such acts of violence. He was later elevated to the position of Director of Graduate Studies of History. Are you kidding me? This is the person they want overseeing the graduate studies in our colleges? A person who endorses murder of someone just because of their conservative beliefs? We are not far from this Nazi type of state because of this movement that is happening from our liberal left. As faculty commit or support violence, students are assured that others are the violent ones. Recently, at the University of Texas at Austin, Professor Kirsten Bradbury tested her students on psychology by asking them, quote unquote, which socio-demographic group is most likely to repeatedly violate the rights of others in a pattern of behavior that includes violence, deceit, irresponsibility, and a lack of remorse. Of course, the answer was wealthy white men. The lesson took with students. A recent poll shows that 41% of college students now believe violence is justified to fight hate speech. At Cornell, a conservative speaker was shouted down, met with the common mantra that your words are violence. At Case Western, the student newspaper editorialized against university recognition of a pro-life group because its pro-life views are quote unquote inherently violent and quote unquote a danger to the student body. At Wesley, student editors declared that it was time to shut down conservative speakers and that hostility may be warranted. They added, the spirit of free speech is to protect the suppressed, not to protect a free-for-all where anything is acceptable, no matter how hateful and damaging. And yet, isn't that the very description of what these liberals are doing? They are hateful, they are damaging of people's property, their businesses, all in a sense of justification against the freedom to have an opinion that differs from theirs. How is that not fascist by nature? Those views did not spontaneously appear in the minds of these students. At one time, tolerance for free speech was the very touchstone of higher education and a common article of faith for students. These students are the product of years of being told that free speech is dangerous and harmful if left unregulated. From elementary school to college, they were taught that they did not have to be quote unquote triggered by the speech of others. And yet they're taught that today, aren't they? We are still thankfully drawing the line at machete attacks, but it is the underlying views of Rodriguez that are the true threat, and they are being replicated throughout the country. We are raising a generation of censors and speech phobics. If we want to stop or reverse this trend, Congress must act. I have proposed legislation that would deny federal funding to schools that do not protect core free speech principles. We are funding schools that are taking a machete to the defining right for our democracy. So, look, with all this said, it is undeniable that the direction liberals are taking this country in is exactly the direction they've convinced so many that they're fighting against. As we can clearly see in the reports of the media, it is the liberals who are attempting to establish a fascist state whereby everyone has to believe whatever it is that they're told. And clearly, by the continual demonstration of their violent opposition towards others who have a different perspective, should anyone differ in their opinion, said one has no rights. For they are a racist, bigoted, violent terrorist who should be censored and even physically attacked for thinking contrary to the state. It is actually astounding to me that so many can be mindlessly blind to how it is those who claim to be the champions of social justice are in fact the ones that are violently oppressing others' rights of their freedom. It astounds me that in spite of the multitude of media coverage of liberals oppressing a conservative from simply speaking, or of how often you see peaceful students with pro-life beliefs having their tables destroyed and then being physically attacked, or in the violent riots that destroy businesses, that these people can remain so mindlessly blind to the evidence that it is in fact them who are the ones fighting for fascism. Now, for everyone out there, especially you young people, who have jumped onto the social justice warrior bandwagon, allowing your thinking to have been manipulated into conformity with their liberal ideology, a warning. You should know that you're working for your own destruction. You see, because when this liberal ideology of everyone having to agree with them has become the premise for life in this country, you will find that all of your freedoms will also be lost. Because when they get the power that you are helping them to achieve, make no mistake to think that they won't take your rights away from you too. And at that point, it'll be too late for you. And you'll desperately wish that you hadn't been so mindless whereby you were so easily manipulated into helping them to create the very environment that now afflicts you and those you love. But when it happens, realize that you have no cause to whine about it, because such is the reward of ignorance and stupidity. So let me know in the comments just what your thoughts are. If you enjoyed this type of content, please share it with others, as it definitely will help the channel to grow. And please don't forget to hit that like button, to click that subscribe button, and punch that notification bell to be notified of any and all new videos. Hey, as always, I want to say thanks for taking the time to listen. Until next time.